October 14th, 1943. The sky above Schweinfurt burns with contrails and tracer fire. At 26,000 feet, where the air is thin enough to kill and cold enough to freeze blood inside a wound, a lone B-17 flying fortress limps toward the Swiss border. Its name is painted in fading letters along the fuselage. The old pub. 2 engines are dead, trailing black smoke. The tail section is shredded, revealing skeletal framework beneath torn aluminum skin. The ball turret hangs silent, its gunner dead. Through holes large enough to crawl through. The October wind screams into the fuselage, carrying with it the smell of burning oil and cordite. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, 21 years old, fights to keep the aircraft level while his navigator bleeds out on the deck behind him. This is Brown's first combat mission. It will be his last chance to see home. 3 miles below, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler of WW2 27 climbs toward the crippled bomber in his Messerschmitt Bf 109, his finger resting on the cannon trigger. Stigler has already shot down to B-17s this morning. One more kill will earn him the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor, the medal his brother wore when he died over Britain 3 years ago. The mathematics are simple. The B-17 is defenseless. The kill is certain. What happens in the next 11 minutes will haunt both men for 46 years, until a chance letter reunites them and they discover that the war's most profound truth was never about killing at all. The story of the old pub and the German fighter pilot who refused to destroy it cannot be understood without first understanding what the air war over Germany had become by the autumn of 1943. This was the period American bomber crews called the Black Summer, when casualty rates reached 70% and life expectancy for an 8th Air Force crew was measured in missions. 15 missions qualified a crew for rotation home. Most never reached 5. The Boeing B-17. Flying Fortress had earned its name through defensive firepower. 13 50 caliber machine guns creating interlocking fields of fire that could shred any fighter foolish enough to attack directly. But the Luftwaffe had learned. They attacked head-on now, where only 2 guns could engage, closing at a combined speed of 500 miles per hour. Firing 20mm cannons that could tear a bomber apart with a single burst. The survival strategy was simple and brutal. Stay in formation. A tight formation of B-17s created a defensive box of overlapping fire, so dense that German fighters called it the Iron Box and approached it only with prayers or desperation. But a bomber that fell out of formation, damaged or dying, became what the Luftwaffe pilots called a Dobschuss, certain kill. In the old pub, struggling to maintain altitude, with half its engines dead and most of its defensive guns silent, was very much alone. Franz Stigler had grown up in the Bavarian Alps, the son of a World War I pilot who taught his children that there were rules even in war, codes that separated soldiers from murderers. Stigler had flown combat missions over North Africa and the Mediterranean, where the war still retained something resembling chivalry, where pilots on both sides would waggle their wings in salute before trying to kill each other, where men who bailed out of stricken aircraft were allowed to descend in peace. But the air war over Germany was different. This was total war, where entire cities vanished in firestorms, where bomber crews dropped their loads on residential districts and fighter pilots machine-gunned parachuting survivors. Stigler had shot down 22 Allied aircraft. He had seen friends die in flames. He had watched B-17s drop their bombs on Munich, the city where his mother lived, and he had felt the hate that comes when the killing becomes personal. When he intercepted the old pub that October morning, he expected to see what he always saw: a dying machine, an enemy combatant, a target. What he saw instead would change everything. As Stigler's Messerschmitt closed to within 50 meters of the B-17's tail, close enough to see individual rivets in the torn metal, close enough to read the serial numbers stenciled on the vertical stabilizer, he looked into the bomber's waistgun windows and saw not soldiers preparing to fight, but broken boys trying desperately to save each other. The waist gunner lay crumpled against the fuselage, his position abandoned, his weapon pointing at nothing. Through the gaps in the aircraft's skin, Stigler could see the entire crew, the navigator pressing a bandage against a wounded man's chest. The radio operator trying to hand crank a jammed gun turret. The pilot hunched over the controls with the intensity of someone holding life together through sheer will. They were so close, Stigler could see their faces. They were children. Most of them looked younger than his students. He had been a fighter instructor before the war, teaching boys barely old enough to shave how to kill and how to die. The B-17's tail gunner, who should have been firing at Stigler's fighter, was slumped forward in his position, either dead or unconscious. The bomber was not a threat. It was a coffin flying on momentum and prayer, carrying 10 men who would be corpses within minutes if Stigler fired. Stigler pulled his Messerschmitt alongside the bomber's wing, close enough that Charlie Brown, seeing the German fighter through his cockpit window, believed for a moment that this was a hallucination brought on by blood loss and oxygen deprivation. German fighters did not fly formation with American bombers. They destroyed them. But there was Stigler, 50 feet away, making eye contact with Brown, pointing frantically toward Switzerland, trying through gestures to communicate what could not be said across the void of language and nationality. Go, fly that way. I will not shoot you. Just go. Brown stared back, not understanding, unable to process what he was seeing. His training had taught him how to fight and how to die. No one had taught him what to do when the enemy offers mercy. For 11 minutes, Stigler flew escort for the old pub, waving off other German fighters, guiding the crippled bomber toward neutral airspace, knowing that if his own commander saw this, if anyone reported what he was doing, he would be executed for treason. At the Swiss border, Stigler saluted, rolled his fighter away, and disappeared back into the war. Charlie Brown and his crew crossed into Switzerland, landed wheels up in a field, and lived. For decades, they told no one what happened, because what happened made no sense in the narrative of total war. You did not survive because your enemy chose mercy. You survived because you were lucky or skilled or blessed, not because somewhere inside the machinery of death, humanity still flickered. The symbolism of that moment. German fighter flying protection for an American bomber would not reveal its full meaning until 1990, when Charlie Brown, haunted for 46 years by the memory of that salute, published a letter in a newsletter for former Luftwaffe pilots, asking if anyone knew the pilot of a Messerschmitt Bf-109 who had spared a crippled B-17 over Germany in October 1943. Franz Stigler, living quietly in Canada, read that letter and felt the past collapse into the present. They met 6 months later in a hotel in Seattle. Brown had brought his crew. Stigler had brought photographs from the war, including one of himself standing beside his Messerschmitt, young and confident in a way that men who survive wars rarely remain. They spent 3 days together, 2 old men reconstructing 11 minutes that defined their lives. And what emerged was not a story about aerial combat or military strategy, but about the choice that exists even inside the worst moments of history. Stigler explained what Brown had never understood. His commanding officer, Gustav Radel, had told him on his first day of combat that if he ever shot a man in a parachute, if he ever killed a defenseless enemy, Radel would shoot him himself. You are fighter pilots, Radel had said. You are not murderers. That code, that line, Stigler refused to cross, had saved 10 lives and condemned him to decades of wondering if he had betrayed his country by being human. The hidden advantage the old pub carried that day was not a secret weapon or tactical innovation. It was the moral clarity of a single man who understood that honor and mercy are not weaknesses, even in total war. German propaganda had taught Stigler that American bomber crews were Terrorflieger Sterne flyers, war criminals who murdered German civilians from the safety of high altitude. But when Stigler looked into that shattered B-17, he did not see criminals. He saw what he had always feared he would see if he looked closely enough: himself. Boys who wanted to go home. Sons that mothers prayed for. Men trapped inside a machine designed to kill them, doing what they were ordered to do, just as he was doing what he was ordered to do. The difference was that Stigler in that moment chose to see them. In seeing them, he could not kill them. That choice, made in seconds at 26,000 feet while the war raged around them, became the only victory that mattered, the only triumph over the machinery of hate that consumed 50 million lives. Franz Stigler died in 2008. Charlie Brown died in 2008, 8 months later. They had become brothers, bonded not by the war that tried to make them enemies, but by the moment one man refused to pull a trigger. The ghost fortress flies still in memory, a symbol not of American industrial might or German military prowess, but of the stubborn humanity that survives, even when every system, every ideology, every nation demands its death. In an age when wars are fought by drones and algorithms, when killing happens at distances so great the enemy never has a face. The story of the old pub reminds us that mercy is not obsolete, that honor is not naive, that the choice to see another human being and refuse to destroy them is the only weapon that ever truly wins. The hidden advantage was never hidden. It was simply the courage to remain human when inhumanity would have been easier. And in the burning sky above Germany, for 11 minutes that lasted a lifetime, two men from opposite sides of a genocidal war proved that even in the darkest hour, dawn is still possible.